Faith and Family Fellowship Podcast is a Christ-centered podcast. Established in 2019 and hosted weekly by Pastor Chris Busher. Addressing a host of topics such as the Great Commission, Christian discipleship, and often featuring interviews with special guests who are experts in their field. The views and events expressed on this podcast and all related materials belong solely to their author and not necessarily to the author's employer, organization, committee, or other group or individual. While all attempts are made to present accurate information, some information may become outdated over time. Faith and Family Fellowship Podcast makes every attempt to timely update any and all such information. Without further delay, here's another powerful episode of Faith and Family Fellowship Podcast.
Welcome back to another episode of Faith and Family Fellowship Podcast. Once again, my name is Dallas here, calling you all the way from Brazil today. And today we have another amazing guest in the studio with us, Blake Isbell. Blake, how are you today? It's such a pleasure to have you.
I'm doing great, Dallas. Thank you so much for having me on today.
It's my pleasure, and our audience are going to really enjoy your time here today. Blake, you are a musician. You've been writing music for quite a while now, and you have 2 studio albums that we're going to talk about today. And your most recent, tell us what the title is, please.
So my second studio album is titled Letters to Lipscomb.
And your first album was titled?
My first album is titled Tales of Navarro.
Okay, so we're going to talk about both of those. Stay tuned. And before we talk about those specifically in your career as a musician and all of those fun things, I just want to ask you your personal testimony. So tell us a little bit about your faith journey, your life with Christ, some things like this, so we can get to know you a little bit better.
Okay, so my introduction to Christ and Christianity began when I was very young. I had my mother was a Christian, and she and also I had some other family members like my grandmother, and they would give me like these books to read that I remember I had one that was like 365 short stories or something. So, I started with all the Bible tales and like Adam and Eve and David and Goliath and Samson and all that fun stuff. And so I always knew about Christ and knew about the story of the Bible ever since I was little. And my mother would always say a prayer with me every single night, which was growing up when I was young, which was really cool. And then whenever I hit about 11, 12, 13 years old, somewhere in there, my faith really started to come through. And there were some difficult times, even at that age, that I was going through. And I just started developing a very personal and intimate relationship with God, and started, praying. And I think my favorite activity has always been, my favorite way to connect with God has always been through music, like with singing songs to Him, and really because a lot of songs are prayers, and so I catch myself like praying in the songs, or even like just saying a prayer, praying lyrics of a song sometimes. Like it just happens because I probably have like over 1,000 songs memorized. Ever since I was little, that's been like my biggest talent, is memorizing lyrics to songs and stuff. So I have a lot of stuff memorized, and I can just whip it out of my head. And
you're saying like the lyrics are also the chords as well?
Not the chords. I'm talking about like being able to sing the melody and the lyrics from a song that I just hear. So all of the Christian songs that, I can memorize it like after 2 or 3 times I listen to it. I was better when I was younger. Now it might take me a little bit longer depending on the song, but I have like over 1,000. I don't even know how much, but it's definitely over 1,000 different Christian songs memorized. And so they play a really special part with my relationship with God. And yeah, I think my favorite thing about God is, that's really hard to say, actually. One of my favorite things about God is that He's been there through every single chapter of my life, because I've had many different chapters of my life. And God knows me better than I know myself. And I really, I believe that God is the ultimate artist. Like He's like the number one biggest artist. I mean, he created everything. And so it's really cool, like once you surrender your life to him, and he kind of he's like kind of is like the puppet master of certain things. It's really cool whenever something enters your life and you're like, why is this here? Like, what is this? Why am I here? Why did this happen? XYZ. And then like later, a year or two later, you realize, wow, that's why that happened. That's what God was doing. And I believe that God speaks in many different ways, and it's very beautiful. And I find a lot of comfort because there's been people that have come in and out of my life throughout all my chapters, and it's very comforting to have a relationship that's consistent throughout my entire life. And of course, I have that blessing because I did get to know God and became a Christian when I was young, so as well. So yeah.
Yeah, Blake, thanks for sharing that. Now I feel like we know you a little bit better. We can ask you some deeper questions. For example, when did you find out, like when people would be like, hey, you can sing really well? Like what age did you realize, yeah, I can, you know?
You're listening to the Faith and Family Fellowship Podcast. We'll be right back after this quick word from our sponsors.
The Dwelling Place Lounge is in partnership with the social media ministry for the Dwelling Place Church in Anchorage, Alaska. In the lounge, they weekly discuss each Sunday's message and go further in depth and reflect on the powerful message given. You will be listening to their campus senior pastor, Peach Jones, along with co-host Ray Daniel for further learning in a fun and laid-back podcast style. Find more information by searching thedwellingplaceak.com.
I actually was so afraid of singing when I was younger. It's so weird because I actually don't get stage fright these days at all. Like I get scared when I talk. I'm more afraid of public speaking than I am performing. Give me like a guitar and something to sing and I am not scared at all.
And why do you think that is? What do you think the difference is for that in your mind?
Maybe because I just feel more comfortable. I mean, I've always said that whenever I'm like singing a song or something, that's just kind of my natural habitat, my natural environment. And I feel like I'm able to express myself at its purest form. And whenever I speak, things aren't always taken. I don't feel like I have as much control with how things are taken as much whenever I'm speaking. But whenever I'm singing a song, it's like on a different level, and it's like I have more control over the message that I'm trying to deliver. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that it's a song and not just words. But also I have an insecurity about my speaking voice too. We all have insecurities. And so that's one of my insecurities, but I really do like to listen to my singing voice. I feel like a lot of people don't like their singing voice, but I like to listen to my singing voice. I don't have a problem with that. So it's, that also might play something into it. And yeah, and it's also really cool as well, just being able to play a song and like everybody can speak, but not everyone can play a song that they wrote last night. I mean, as far as whenever I found out I was a good singer, I knew that I had a good voice, but like when I was younger. But of course, whenever boys are going through puberty and stuff, their voices change a whole lot. And so there was actually a period in time for like 2 years or so in my childhood where I could only sing bass. I could not sing tenor. It's like my tenor stuff just went away. But then somehow, I guess it came back later and I could sing bass and tenor stuff. So, because I have over a 2-octave range, and the higher stuff started coming back later on. And I started writing songs when I was a senior in high school. My singing has developed over time. I'm not one of those people that I'm this prodigy 10-year-old that just can sing, go on America's Got Talent and win the competition and whatever. Like, no, this is something I've worked at for a long time, and something I've developed. And so I just kind of the longer you do something, the better you get at it. That's typically how it goes. So I knew I had a good voice, but then it was getting better at singing, and I still have room for improvement as well. Like probably 5 years from now, I'll be even better. So it's really
We'll
cool.
have to have you back on in 5 years, and your fifth album comes out. We'll have to talk about
fifth or sixth album or something. Exactly.
Yeah. And Blake, I'm going to be completely honest with you. I can't relate with you in music because I don't play any instruments. I took a couple years of piano and I played some drums in high school, but musically talented is not something that I have. I did write my wife a song for her birthday, and it's so hard to write music. And so I just got to ask, what was your first song? What was that like? What were some of the words?
Oh, wow. What an interesting question. So the first song that I ever wrote is called Broken Soldier, and I wrote it in the middle of childhood depression. That's kind of how my songwriting started. It was a coping mechanism that I formed from childhood depression. I went through a very rough patch, like senior year in high school. And I taught myself how to play guitar. I just looked up the chords and just did chord progressions over and over and over again. And then I started writing songs. And the first song I wrote is called Broken Soldier. It tells the story of, it's not available anywhere. So if you wanted to listen to it, maybe 10 years from now or something, I'll release like from the vault, Broken Soldier. I don't know, but it's actually a pretty decent song. I wrote it in C# minor. So the first song I ever wrote was in C# minor. So that's really interesting. It's not a very common key to write a song in. And it tells the story of like a soldier kind of out at war, and it's very morbid and dark. And I remember when I showed it to my mom, she was really worried. She was like, "That's not like you," because typically I'm a very, happier person, lighter personality. And I came up with this very dark song. And what's interesting is a lot of songs I wrote, like the first, I probably had like 15 or 16 songs written probably within 5 months that I started songwriting. And almost all of those songs are what I like to call sad ballads. They're like slow songs, and they're really sad, really depressing. It's like the type of music that you put on to try and make yourself feel better, but it doesn't always make you feel better. Sometimes it makes you feel worse. So yeah.
It's like a very specific genre. Like it makes you feel better, but it doesn't. It's kind of worse. Yeah, I get it.
Well, if you're wanting something to relate to, or if you have like that really sad, heartbreaking emotion that you're feeling right now, and you want to explore that or feel understood or something like that, that's typically the genre you'll go to, like that type of song.
Sounds like you need to release it for us.
Well, I do have some songs that I wrote back in high school that are quite interesting, actually. And at some point in my career, I do want to go back and write an album or two about my childhood, because the way my artistry is set up is every album is like a chapter of my life. That's kind of how it's set up in a way. And so I don't have anything representing the first 19 years of my life. So I would probably end up at some point writing albums to reflect on that time of my life. And who knows, I might resurrect some of the classic high school ballads.
The good stuff. That's great. And tell us a little bit more about your first studio album. So what was that like? How old were you? What inspired the album? You said it's a little bit about your life, but tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah. So whenever I started writing my first album, I did not know that I was going to release it, let alone record it. I kind of, this is just who I am. Like, this is how I process life. It's how I express myself. It's like, there's probably 10 plus reasons why I do this. And I was applying for college at Lipscomb University in Nashville, Tennessee. And unfortunately, I did not get accepted with the first application that I did. So I was like, okay, well, I got to put pedal to the metal and start this now. And so I actually recorded my first album on my own. I produced it on my own, and then I got someone else to mix it and master it for me. A student at Nashville ended up like at Lipscomb, mixed it and mastered it for me. And whenever I first started writing the album, I just was really creative, and I kind of first of all, the album is about Navarro, which is my first college. That's why it's called Tales of Navarro. It's a concept album. It has a fantasy vibe, and every single song kind of has a plot, and it tells one big story. But also the songs can stand alone as well. So it's really cool, and it's very, like, you can listen to that album 500 times and you'll still probably find something that you didn't realize before. It has a lot of depth. I don't even remember everything I put in it. It has so much stuff in it. I would say that the production quality is not as refined as my second or third album. I'm sorry, I'm working on my third album right now.
Okay, so. I was like, we only heard about two. What's going on here?
There you go. Yeah, I'm currently halfway through my third album, and I'm really excited about it. But my albums after my first album were produced in a professional studio with professional musicians and stuff. And my first album is something I kind of did by myself at 18. So you definitely can hear a difference in quality. And I definitely have considered re-recording my first album at some point in my career for that reason, because I would like for it to have the same quality as the rest of my music. But yeah, so I just every song relates to the fantasy aesthetic in the album, but it also relates to something that happened in my life that's personal. So it's really cool. Every single one of my songs are true. I don't write fake songs. I don't see the point in that. I don't want to litter my discography with false stuff, like, because that's not what I'm about. So I mean, it's possible I'll write a song that isn't as related to me and is kind of just me having fun writing a song, but more times than not, there's something about it that relates to me in one way or another. So yeah, and that's part of the luxury of writing your own songs, is you get to tell the story and you're not telling someone else's story.
And going into the second album, so how long was it between the first one and the second? Like, let's say the release of the first and the starting of the recording of the second.
Yeah, so I released both albums in 2021, actually. It took me a long time to figure out how to do the first album. So the first album was in the works, like from when I started recording it, probably for 14, 15 months, because I was doing it by myself and I had to figure out a lot of things on my own. But my second album, because I found a producer and I got in with the studio, we recorded my second album in one summer. And then I was able to release singles throughout the fall. And then I released the whole thing in December of 2021. So both of my first two albums released in 2021. So that's really cool. And whenever I first started writing my second album, I didn't know that it was going to be an album. I was actually, because I had a very small chapter of my life in Nashville. It was only 3 or 4 months long, but even though it was really short, it felt like a bona fide chapter of my life that plays a part in my life story. And so, and I knew that I was already moving on with my life. So I knew that I had to, it was now or never. Like, I have to get this album out. And because it was such a short time frame, and it was only representing so little time in my life, I was going to do an EP. I was going to write like maybe 4 or 5 songs and release it. But what ended up happening is in May of 2021, when I wasn't in school anymore, because it was summer, I had a week of just free time, which I don't get very often. And I started writing the EP, and I ended up writing 9 songs in 1 week.
That's insane.
So, and I liked all of the songs. So I wrote my entire second album. I'm sorry, not 9 songs. It was 8 songs. But I wrote my whole second album.
I mean, 8 songs. Come on. That's a lot for us people who don't do music. That's a lot. Wow.
Yeah, I wrote my entire second album in 1 week, except for one song. My song, Laura, which is track 4, I wrote that the winter of like December of 2020. But every other song on the album I wrote in 1 week. And then I started recording it right after that. And I managed to get all the recording done. It's a short album. It only has 8 tracks on the standard edition, and then it has 2 bonus tracks on the physical copy. I like that it's a short album because it's to represent that that was also a short time in my life. And I also felt like I got to talk about everything I wanted to talk about. So it was really cool.
Yeah, talking a little bit more for our audience, what is your genre? What would you?
Yeah, so my home genre is pop. I also borrow a lot from rock and country and folk. So I kind of hang out in the pop realm, but it's not just pure pop. I kind of do hybrid genres. So if you like country music, I have something for you you'll probably like. If you like rock, I have something for you you'll probably like. And also, I always have at least one Christian song on my albums, because my albums are a reflection of me, and that's just my Christianity is such a big part of me. And so if you like to listen to Christian music, you will definitely find that in my music as well. And you'll also will find the influence of a Christian writer, because there are things that are people tell me all the time that my music sounds like Christian music. And even though like the songs aren't directly about God or anything like that, you can feel the Christian influence, I would say, in my art.
And a little bit about those songs that you said were inspired by your faith. Tell us a little bit more about those. What are the names of those songs? What are some of the things that you talk about in that song?
So on my first album, I have first of all, I have a tradition where I always put the song about God as the second to last track. So I have like these specific types of tracks that I do whenever I'm making an album. So there's an opening track, and then there's a closing track, and then there's like a second to last track, which is where I stick the Christian God song. On my first album, that song is called Hymn of the Outcast, and I love that song so much. I had so much fun writing that song, and I was going through a very traumatic time in my life. I had a very dark summer, and I felt very hopeless, and it was very, very bad. And I remember the first time that I smiled, and it was real. And so I kind of listed that as like the first glimpse of light that you have when you're going through a really, really dark time. And I wrote a song over that concept. So the song pivots off of the plot in the fantasy album, and it's about like someone that's on the shores of a bay, like on like the beach, and it's nighttime, and there's palm trees swaying through the wind, and they're just like lost. They're like an outcast that's lost out there. And then all of a sudden they see there's a song earlier on the album called The Tower, and it's the Tower of Hope, and the tower returns in this song, and he sees like the end of the chorus is, the lonely tower stands tall from the shore, I found it in my Lord. So the tower, he sees the tower that he had all that hope in from a song at the beginning of the album, and he's looking back on that, and
that's cool when you can make it a story
to him for the first time. Yeah, that's my first album for you. I think my first album is rather underrated. I think that because I produced it myself, like people kind of listen to other stuff from me more, and that's why I feel like I have to re-record it, because I really do feel like some of my work on my first album is some of my best work. And so but yeah, so I love Hymn of the Outcast. The bridge in Hymn of the Outcast is one of my favorites. I love it. It's so cool. I have like cannons firing in the background and every like it's really
definitely
cool.
Have to check that out. Definitely have to check
that out. And on my second album, the song is called I Trust in You. And my second album is themed around the idea of rejection and also change that was unexpected, and figuring out how to cope with that change. And I Trust in You is a piano ballad that is just pouring my heart out to God. I'm reflecting on 2 or 3 particular moments that I spent with God in one-on-one and in prayer, and that's what the verses are over. And then I think that the chorus and then a part of the bridge is some of the most beautiful lyrics I've probably ever written. So I guess to cite the chorus real quick, the chorus is, I trust in you and all the trials you put me through, shaping me to be the man you want me to be. And I'll follow you, do what you want me to do. With you, I could catch the moon. I belong to you and I trust in you. And then the bridge has a lyric that is very, very emotional for me. And it's, thank you for the blessings. I'll stay with you and love you forever. And that idea of, like what I mentioned at the beginning of the podcast, that idea that our relationship with God is always there, it's always consistent, and we will we're stay with you and love you forever. Like, what other thing is more beautiful, to me at least? And so that lyric, I find myself praying the lyrics to that song sometimes, because I still have other things. I think we all can relate to that time in our lives when something happens that was unexpected and we don't know what's going to happen next. And then we just have to trust in God. So that's what that song is about. I actually cried in the vocal booth when I recorded that song. That's a fun fact. It's the only song that it's like that for. So what you're listening, when you hear the song, I probably have like a tear running down my face or something. So it's a rather emotional one for me.
And we're going to talk about your third one coming out soon, but I have another question in between. What would you say are your two greatest gifts as a musician, as a songwriter?
Whenever I listen to a bunch of music on the radio and stuff, they feel very bland and like, what is this about? That's not everybody, of course. There's definitely phenomenal artists out there that will come on with songs. But, and I think in Christian music, I also feel like in Christian music, it can get kind of repetitive as well. Like the same metaphors being used, the very consistent and not really anything particularly unique a lot of times. And I feel like my music is very, very unique, and storytelling is something that is probably one of my two gifts that really set me apart. So the second gift that I'm saying is the creativity that I have. So because I get to do all stages of it, like I write it, I record it, and I'm also the one making decisions with the production as well. Like, no one is there to tell me, yes, you can do this, no, you can't do this. That's probably the best thing about being an independent musician, is I have control over, and I also get to own it all. I own my first two albums. Most artists, they don't own their work.
Yeah,
and I do.
It's awesome.
And so there's a lot of perks of being an independent artist, but because I have that freedom, I get to make all the decisions. And so an idea that I have while I'm writing a song, I can take that to the studio and go for it and then put it in there. And it's something really wild. I think whenever you listen to my first album, you hear a ton of stuff like that, because I have all kinds of stuff. I have, like in my song, The Royal Ball, I have like a door shutting. Like, you just hear a door closing. And that's because the first part of the song, you're kind of outside on the balcony, reminiscing in the stars, and then you hear a door shut, and then all of a sudden you're in the ballroom. So that's an example. And then, of course, I mentioned the Cannons and Hymn of the Outcast. So I like to make things very atmospheric with my music, and it's very creative, and it's stuff that you're probably not going to hear from very many other artists. And I also have a wide range of instruments that I put in my music. Like, I have harp, and I think there's an oboe. I played oboe growing up, by the way, so you hear me playing oboe in my first song, Hail Navarro, on my first album. And then on my song Dreamer, which is a bonus song on my second album, there's an alto flute. So that's all featured all throughout the song. So there's a wide range of all kinds of sounds and instruments across all of my music. And that's able to happen because I have control of those decisions, but also because I'm pretty creative and I am not afraid to go outside the box and do something different and unique.
Yeah. Would you ever be willing to lose the control?
Probably not. And the reason why is because my music means more than just the fact that I'm an artist. It is my primary form of expression. And it's more about me telling my story and sharing my story with people. And if there's a song that I write that is so just, I have to tell this song, like this story is part of my story and people need to hear it, but then someone's like, no, like it's not catchy enough, or it's too long, or whatever, then I'm not going to put up with that. I'm like, no, I'm releasing this song. So, like, that's why I do what I do. I'm not doing this so I get famous or anything. Like, that's not my goal. So no, I probably wouldn't be interested in losing the control, to tell you the truth. I mean, what I say goes with my artistry, and I want to keep it that way.
Yeah, I totally respect that. I get it.
Yeah, they might could talk me out of it and say like, I don't know about that song, and maybe I'll try to write another one that tells the same story or something. But I don't usually run into those problems, actually. Like, most of the time, my songs are good for the album.
Yeah, whenever you're in control, you can decide what stays, what goes.
Yeah, that's why I went the independent artist route, and I didn't try to get signed or anything. I'm like, I'm not interested. And I'm also not really interested in being famous. I mean, if it happens, it happens, but that doesn't sound like a lifestyle I'm interested in. I would like to be able to go out in public and live my life, So that's just not the direction I'm trying to go in. I'm just trying to tell my story and just try to connect with people and touch people in whatever way I can. That's more of what it's about.
And finally, tell us a little bit more about this third album you're working on. You're halfway through. What's the title of the album? Can we know?
Yeah, you can know. So the album is currently, unless I change my mind, but I feel very confident that it's going to be called Deconstruction. And it's shaping up to have 16 tracks and one bonus track, so 17 in total. And so it's the biggest album that I've made. I'm currently halfway through the process. Like, I have about 8 or 9 songs finished recording. Like, if I wanted to release them all tomorrow, I could. Like, they're done. But I'm still kind of writing the rest of the album. I have all the song ideas and I have fragments for them, but I'm just finishing up the writing process. And then I'm scheduled to finish recording it this summer. And so I'm looking at like a fall release or a winter release right now.
And why this title? Because we hear this word a lot. This is a popular word right now, deconstruction. So tell us a little bit more about the choosing of the name for this album.
Yeah, my third album, it's very dark. It's a very dark album. It's probably the most vulnerable album I have ever put out, and possibly ever. I mean, I don't know what my life's going to look like 20 years from now or anything, but it's definitely going to be one of the most vulnerable albums I ever put out. And so I've had a lot of turmoil in my faith lately. I've realized that I didn't really understand I didn't really understand the concept of grace and atonement like I should have. And so what would happen is, like, I would sin and then I'd be terrified of going to hell because I sinned. And that's, like, in my opinion, the most traumatizing thing ever, because nothing is more scary than eternal damnation. Mm-hmm. And that's something that I lived almost all of my life. And so the particular doctrine that I was affiliated with, I had to cut out of my life for a lot of different reasons. And there was also something very traumatic that happened in my life over the past year that I will touch on in my second album. But I'm very discreet, kind of. It's like, if you know, you know. And if you really wanted to figure out what was happening, you would. But it's like something you have to dig deeper into, if you know what I mean. Mm-hmm. But I've gone through a really dark time over the past year, and that's what the album is about. And I have done a lot of reshaping of certain beliefs that I've had. I never lost sight of God and the Bible and Christ and that type of stuff, but I have done a lot of reshaping over things that I believe in, like certain things, certain doctrine beliefs. And so I was told that this is called a deconstruction period. And so this album is the story of my deconstruction, and it touches on many different themes that have to do with that wild roller coaster. And so that's why it's called Deconstruction.
Well, Blake, thank you so much for sharing everything that you did today. We get to know you a little bit, your albums a little bit, your story a little bit as well. And if you could leave our audience with one overall thought from your time here today, what do you think that would be?
I think the most important thing is probably what I said earlier on, just about the relationship with God, and just trusting in him, and trusting that, whenever you're going through a hard time, he's still with you. Even if you don't necessarily feel like he is still with you. And if you just keep at it, and you pay close enough attention, you'll figure out later on why things shaped out the way that they are. Because there's kind of a domino effect that goes on through life. You never know what's going to happen, and certain things that happen to you will come in handy later. You might meet somebody that went through something you went through, and then you're able to bond over that and help them. Or something good might happen after something bad happened. I had this debate with a college professor. I'm graduated now, by the way. I'm not in college anymore, so that's great. But he told me that he believes that whenever your glass is empty, like when you're in your darkest moment and you don't have anything going on, that's when you are the most effective in God's kingdom. And I can understand where he's coming from, but I actually kind of disagree with that philosophy. I believe my glass has to be full in order to pour into other people. Because if I don't have anything to give, then it becomes all about me. It becomes about me trying to survive, me trying to get through my whatever mental illnesses I'm going through. And it's a lot more about me. But if I'm in a healthy place, I'm able to pour into a whole bunch of other people and really serve more, make more of a difference. So I believe that, I really do believe in taking care of yourself. Like if you have something you're going through, it's okay to take care of yourself. Like you're not being selfish for taking care of whatever you need to take care of if you're going through a dark time, because I believe that we need to build one another up and all be in a healthy spot to pour into one another. So that's a philosophy that I have that I wanted to share.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Blake. Thank you so much for joining us today. All the things that you shared, all of the links are below. You can find his albums, you can find his social media, his Instagram, his Facebook, anywhere else that we can find you. Do you have any music on YouTube as well?
I probably recommend, if you have all of those things, YouTube is probably the best experience, because there are lyric videos for the first and second album. And then I have a song from my first album that has a music video. And then if you wanted to contact me, the best way to do that is through my website, blakeisbell.com. Very simple. It's just my name.com. And then there's a contact page that you can send me an email, and I will reach out to, I'll be getting back in touch with you.
Excellent. You definitely have a musician name, Blake Isbell. I mean, that's such a musician name, Blake Isbell. It's like, it's very quick. It's very easy. Comes off the tongue.
Well, thank you. It's really funny because the first song I ever released is called Ring. I released it in the fall of 2020, and it's a song about a bell ringer that's trying to get noticed. And so what I did is I was like, what would my occupation be in this fantasy kingdom? And I was like, well, I'd be the bell ringer because my last name is Isbell. So, so the first song that I ever released actually is kind of a play on my name as well. So that's really funny.
Well, again, Blake, thank you for joining us today. I really appreciate your time. We'll see you on the next one.
You've just listened to the Faith and Family Fellowship Podcast with your host, Pastor Chris Busher. Faith and Family Fellowship Podcast was recorded live in studio with final editing made before uploading. Subscribe today to Faith and Family Fellowship Podcast on iTunes or Google Play. For more fantastic daily content, visit Pastor Chris Busher online via Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram. Don't miss the next episode on Faith and Family Fellowship Podcast.